We're continuing our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're on Canto 3, Chapter 26. And we're taking up at text number 27. No objections? That must be it then. What? Okay. Nati. Kṛṣṇa Sagar is not here, so we don't know what page we're on. 28? The mind of the living entity is known by the name of Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish-black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. The system of yoga entails controlling the mind, and the lord of the mind is Aniruddha. It is stated that Aniruddha is four-handed, with Sudarshan chakra, conch shell, club, and lotus flower. There are 24 forms of Vishnu, each differently named. Among these 24 forms, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and Vasudeva are depicted very nicely in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it is stated that Aniruddha is worshipped by the yogis. Meditation upon voidness is a modern invention of the fertile brain of some speculator. Actually, the process of yoga meditation, as prescribed in this verse, should be fixed upon the form of Aniruddha. By meditating on Aniruddha, one can become free from the agitation of acceptance and rejection. When one's mind is fixed upon Aniruddha, one gradually becomes God-realized. He approaches the pure status of Krishna consciousness, which is the ultimate goal of yoga. 29. By transformation of the false ego in passion, intelligence takes birth, O virtuous lady. The functions of intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come into view, and to help the senses. Purport: intelligence is the discriminating power to understand an object, and it helps the senses make choices. Therefore, intelligence is supposed to be the master of the senses. The perfection of intelligence is attained when one becomes fixed in the activities of Krishna consciousness. By the proper use of intelligence, one's consciousness is expanded, and the ultimate expansion of consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Doubt, misapprehension, correct apprehension, memory, and sleep, as determined by their different functions, are said to be the distinct characteristics of intelligence. Purport: doubt is one of the important functions of the intelligence. Blind acceptance of something does not give evidence of intelligence. Therefore, the word samshaya is very important. In order to cultivate intelligence, one should be doubtful in the beginning. But doubting is not very favorable when information is received from the proper source. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that doubting the words of the authority is the cause of destruction. As described in the Patanjali Yoga system, pramana vipraya vikalpanidra smritya. By intelligence only, one can understand things as they are. By intelligence only, one can understand whether or not he is the body. The study to determine whether one's identity is spiritual or material begins in doubt. When one is able to analyze his actual position, the false identification with the body is detected. This is viparyasa. When false identification is detected, then real identification can be understood. Real understanding is described here as nishchaya, or proved experimental knowledge. This experimental knowledge can be achieved when one has understood the false knowledge. By experimental or proved knowledge, one can understand that he is not the body, but spirit soul. Smriti means memory, and swapa means sleep. Sleep is also necessary to keep the intelligence in working order. If there's no sleep, the brain cannot work nicely. In Bhagavad Gita, it is especially mentioned that persons who regulate eating, sleeping, and other necessities of the body in the proper proportion become very successful in the yoga process. These are some of the aspects of the analytical study of intelligence as described in both the Patanjali Yoga system and the Sankhya philosophy system of Kapiladev in Srimad Bhagavatam. Egoism in the mode of passion produces two kinds of senses: the senses for acquiring knowledge and the senses of action. The senses of action depend on the vital energy, and the senses for acquiring knowledge depend on intelligence. It has been explained in the previous verses that mind is the product of ego in goodness, and that the function of the mind is acceptance and rejection according to desire. But here intelligence is said to be the product of ego in passion. That is the distinction between the mind and intelligence. Mind is a product of egoism in goodness, and intelligence is a product of egoism in passion. The desire to accept something and reject something is a very important factor of the mind. Since mind is a product of the mode of goodness, if it is fixed upon the Lord of the mind, Aniruddha, then the mind can be changed to Krishna consciousness. It is stated by Narottam Das Thakur that we always have desires. Desire cannot be stopped. But if we transfer our desires to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the perfection of life. As soon as the desire is transferred to lording it over material nature, it becomes contaminated by matter. Desire has to be purified. In the beginning, this purification process has to be carried out by the order of the spiritual master, since the spiritual master knows how the disciple's desires can be transformed into Krishna consciousness. As far as intelligence is concerned, it is clearly stated here that it is a product of egoism and passion. By practice, one comes to the point of the mode of goodness, and by surrendering or fixing the mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one becomes a very great personality, or Mahatma. In Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly said, Sa Mahatma Sudurlabhaha, such a great soul is very rare. In this verse, it is clear that both kinds of senses, the senses for acquiring knowledge and the senses for action, are products of egoism in the mode of passion. And because the sense organs for activity and for acquiring knowledge require energy, the vital energy or life energy is also produced by egoism in the mode of passion. We can actually see, therefore, that those who are very passionate can improve in material acquisition very quickly. It is recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants to encourage a person in acquiring material possessions, one should also encourage him in sex life. We naturally find that those who are addicted to sex life are also materially advanced, because sex life or passionate life is the impetus for the material advancement of civilization. For those who want to make spiritual advancement, there is almost no existence of the mode of passion. Only the mode of goodness is prominent. We find that those who engage in Krishna consciousness are materially poor, but one who has eyes can see who is the greater. Although he appears to be materially poor, a person in Krishna consciousness is not actually a poor man, but the person who has no taste for Krishna consciousness and appears to be very happy with material possessions is actually poor. Persons infatuated by material consciousness are very intelligent in discovering things for material comforts, but they have no access to understanding the spirit soul and spiritual life. Therefore, if anyone wants to advance in spiritual life, he has to come back to the platform of purified desire, the purified desire for devotional service. Therefore, if anyone wants to advance in spiritual life, he has to come back to the platform of purified desire, the purified desire for devotional service. As stated in the Narada Pancharatra, engagement in the service of the Lord, when the senses are purified in Krishna consciousness, is called pure devotion. In the break, Havi Prabhu was mentioning to me that there's a way Prabhupada used to talk about how long it might take to bring one's consciousness to this higher level Vasudeva, and in some instances he would say, in an instant. And it's indicative here because just as the soul, as Prabhupada mentioned earlier, the conscious living entity, can at any time divert, due to misuse of independence, his attention to Maya. So one can also come back to the platform of purified desire, which means to have a sincere desire for devotional service. So it's the fulcrum of all power of advancement is being sincere and desiring to know Krishna. We hear so many stories of devotees who, before they had an idea of Krishna consciousness, would say, I just sincerely prayed. Whoever you are, wherever you are, please. Havi Prabhu told that story about his coming out of the synagogue and then just making a prayer. And then there was the unfoldment of his devotional path, one thing after another. So I was just struck by this point. I'll read it again. Therefore, if anyone wants to advance in spiritual life, he has to come back to the platform of purified desire, the purified desire for devotional service. Yes, Prabhu?
It's interesting in the course of preaching to students and caring for students, how sometimes they'll come around because it's a nice social atmosphere. They find friends, they find people they can relate with, they want to be spiritual. But they have unsettled doubts in their subconscious, which they're not completely aware of until they're actually practicing. And then those things come out and they're really wondering, what am I getting myself into? And when they hit that point, I just tell them you have to make the decision for yourself that this is what you want to do. And I've seen people, that revelation click for them. And I know that you've mentioned that many times with devotee youth, and Gopal Prabhu brought it up as well, that when the desire comes from their heart that I want to be a devotee, that's when everything begins to click into place and they see the Vishvarupa, so to speak, of Krishna consciousness. I was just reflecting on that sentence that you liked.
Yeah. As Prabhupada says here, one has to, therefore if anyone wants to advance in spiritual life, he has to come back to the platform of purified desire. It's not that purified desire is ever very far away, because it's a matter of the conscious being's eternal constitutional position to serve Krishna. It just has to express it. And then tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddha yogam tam yena mamupayantite. Prabhupada mentions in his purport to that verse, which means that if you sincerely want to serve Krishna, then he, not exactly exact translation, but then he gives the intelligence of how to do that. And he mentions that even somebody who doesn't have the intelligence to take advantage of a spiritual master, if they're very sincere and they try, then Krishna gives them lots of workarounds. I'm looking outside, Gopal, just in case you raise your hand.
Hi, Bob. Hare Krishna. Prabhu, you've mentioned in previous talks in ISV about the Bhuta Studi and how...
Yeah, Bhuta Shuddhi, yeah.
Yes, Bhuta Shuddhi, yes. And then part of the puja, the next mantra, I think, is Naham Vipro Nachara Narapatir from Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yes.
So my understanding is that we're not to identify with...
Keep the mic close.
We're not to identify with being in this gross and subtle material body, and we're not anything besides a pure soul serving Krishna. Then this false ego comes in, and it seems to me so difficult to really go beyond that false ego, that false identification. And Prabhupada just mentions there, but practically speaking, how do I get past the false ego? What's the positive ego? What does that look like?
That I sincerely want to serve Krishna. And the purpose of Bhutta Shuddhi is to approach Krishna with purify the element. Bhutta Shuddhi means to purify the elements, really literally is what it means. And the elements get contaminated with this impure consciousness. And then approaching Krishna with the intention, with Bhutta Shuddhi, after Bhutta Shuddhi, which is really just a paragraph of reorientation to who I am. I'm by nature the eternal servant of Krishna, but by misfortune, due to being inimical towards him since time immemorial, I've been wandering the cycle of birth and death again and again in this material existence, being burnt by the threefold miseries. Now, as a result of some unimaginable good fortune, by the mercy of my spiritual master, I know that I am an infinitesimal spiritual being, completely apart from the gross and subtle body. Now, by the order of my spiritual master, following in his footsteps, I have attained the good fortune of serving the lowest feet as well as the lowest feet of Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Radha Govinda, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. And then, of course, you all know, Naham Vipro Nacha Narapatir Napi Vaishona Shudro Naham Barni Nacha Gripatir No Vanasto Yatirva Kintu Prodnyan Nikila Paramananda Purnam Ratabdir Gopi Parti Parakamali or Das the son of Dāsa. That I'm not any of these designations, not a Brahman, not a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, I'm not a Brahmachari, I'm not a, what comes after that? Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasi. I'm the servant, lowest feet of Krishna. And so, oh yeah, you're asking about the false ego. And then if we're able to notice when, that's in our padatis. And this is under a section in the padatis for deity worship called yoga. You're supposed to gather the ingredients together, and then you assemble them before you worship the deity, and then you sit down, you purify the asana, you purify everything, and then you purify your elements in your body, and then there's a meditation that takes place of how you're the servant of your spiritual master and so forth. So these are not just rote, but if we actually are observant of using the Sankhya, that, and Prabhupada gives guided meditations like this in the Bhagavatam, for instance, 2.2.35, where and he has, even in the third canto here, we've gone through, identify lowest of all. You can use this verse, Indriyani prayanyahur, Indriyabhya paramanaha, manasastu parabudhiryo budhe paratasusa. Lowest of all, of course, he said, are the indriyas. Above the indriyas is the mind. Above the mind is the intelligence. Above the intelligence is the soul. And above the soul is the super soul. And if you can start your worship or your chanting from that perspective, and then notice, as Hamsavatari says in the 11th canto, that you're a witness. And you can actually observe how the false ego is working. As a witness, you can attain a state of what is called the shakshitva, of witnesshood, where you're not any of these elements of the body, you're not the mind, you're not the intelligence, and you're not the false ego. And if you become aware of it as a witness and you're watching it, you can notice that I'm separate from all these inner workings. It's just oftentimes that I'll just be unaware of that, and it's a bewildering state because the mind is carrying us away, and I may be chanting, but I'm not thinking about it. I'm not focused on it, nor am I expressing what's said here to advance in spiritual life. You come back to the platform of purified consciousness, which means to have a sincere desire that, Krishna, I just want to serve you. I don't want anything else. I don't know if I answered your question, but attentiveness can mean taking advantage of these things. And then there's also recommended sankalpa. Besides situating ourselves, then the Bhagavatamrita talks about sankalpa, that if you purify your intention and then you state it, this is why I'm serving you, Krishna. There's a verse in the Sri Upanishad that can be really helpful, which I've used myself. And it's Vayuranilam Amritam Atedam Bashmantam Shariram Om Krato Smara Kritam Smara Krato Smara Kritam Smara. Let this temporary body be burnt to ashes, and let the air of life be merged with the totality of air. Now, my Lord, please remember all my sacrifices, and because you are the ultimate beneficiary, please remember all that I've done for you. If you say that verse before you start chanting your japa, and you can meditate on your air of life being merged with the totality. If you can do Buddha Shuddhi, you can do this, and it's from the Shastra. You can imagine your life air being merged with the totality of air, and let this temporary body be burned to ashes. If you imagine you can imagine your body being, or you can imagine an immolation, and then there's just a pile of ashes, but you're still the witness. The body's gone. It's just the ashes that the air is merged, that's all gone. You're still the soul. So what? So these are some of the ways that one can be more attentive, as mentioned in the process of deity worship. The Vayuranilam Amritam is not in any of the padditis, but the process of separating oneself from the elements in the body and from the designations that I've falsely taken on, which is product of the false ego, and then starting from that position is be very clarifying. And it's actually not that far away. And this is something I've said in a lot of classes on book distribution. And I'm only half kidding when I say it. So when I meet people on book distribution, there's something I say to them that shifts their perspective, which is, you look spiritual. I mean, there's something that leads up to that, but when I say you look spiritual, and I tell the devotees that when I'm teaching book distribution, when you say that to somebody, like try it, say it to somebody, you look spiritual. How do you feel? All of a sudden you feel spiritual. And as I give the example often, if somebody walks up to you and goes, you really look tired, you'll go back to the mirror and, yeah, I do look tired. I feel tired. And so when I tell people, you look spiritual, I say, what happens? Instant self-realization. Because they suddenly go like, yeah, I'm a spirit soul. I actually, how did I come to the material world in the first place? And where's my sincere desire for purified consciousness? And I say I'm only half kidding, because everyone's a spirit soul. And when I say it to them, you look spiritual, I'm like, wow, thanks. I forgot. That's kind of what's happening. And Kapila Dev is just breaking it all down for us in every which way, pulling it all apart and see, it's you and Krishna. There's nothing else going on here, and it's your sincere desire. It's a simple thing. And so it's not impossible to overcome the false ego. And that's something that Devahuti is going to say. She'll say, no, she doesn't say that. She says, it seems impossible. It seems like I'm my body and I don't know how to get out of this conundrum. Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Please. Thank you, Gopal. I'll check with you later if that helped at all.
I just was making a quick comment of appreciation for deity worship and the padditis that have been given also just within ISKCON. We had a Nrsimha Kavachaprabhu come to New York
a little over a year and a half ago and give these deity worship seminars, showed how to do Sotashopachar Puja and all these different things. And I have to say, it's totally changed my spiritual life. So I'm just kind of saying that as a testament for devotees who are looking to get more into it. I highly recommend it. I remember when I first came here, because one of my main services is doing Sotashopachar service for Giriraj and Shalagram. And I remember coming here and I just had this profound realization, oh, this is Giriraj. And it was just like, I guess you can't really put it in words, but it's like that deeper establishment of Sambandha. So I'm just taking a moment to appreciate that and how nicely you spoke about the importance of those things in Buddha Shuddhis.
Okay, we have Devavrata and Yadutama.
Then consult Parameshwar Prabhu with what he's been saying at the table recently, because I mean he says all these really extraordinary things. You're wondering how is that going to work? And what he's been saying recently, as soon as someone comes to the table, they say you look like the high vibrational type of being. He say that to people, and people are like, oh. And it really opens things up. I notice it's completely. It changes the dynamic, especially if you have like a free sign at the table and they're kind of just on like the whole body, like a free thing. But then you just bring it to your high vibrational type of being. It just completely grounds them and brings them into the present.
Yadutama and then Bana Prabhu.
Going off the Buddha Shuddhi and what Narada Muni Prabhu was saying.
How come we can barely hear him?
Haribol. Haribol.
Okay, go ahead.
No, the Buddha. I was just reflecting on this. That I was just thinking that the fulcrum of this Buddha Shuddhi is being grateful, like by my great fortune, by the mercy of my spiritual master, I'm able to understand that I'm not the body. I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, and by his order, I'm engaged in the service of the deities. and then we recite the Naham Vipro Nacharari verse. And I was just thinking about how this gratefulness about what Priti Prabhu, what's his name? Patri Prabhu, he said, we're either grateful or we're great fools, right? And then this gratefulness is actually the fulcrum for everything in our spiritual life. And just reflecting on that.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you, Yadutama. Really nice. Banabhata Prabhu.
I was just thinking when Devavrata Prabhu was talking about how Parameshwar, people, you look like you're really a high vibrational being, that we never know because everyone is a spirit soul. We never know what kind of impact something like that might have on someone, because they're, as spirit souls, they're already thinking some of the things themselves. And then finally when somebody confirms that to them, they're like, wow, somebody's actually confirmed what I've already been thinking about myself. Like, they practically in their mind, they might almost like accept this person as their spiritual master, just hearing that one time. I can understand how it could be really impactful.
Amazing. Okay, well, 1, 2, and anyone outside? Okay, go ahead for the last 2, and then we'll read some more.
I was reflecting on how these verses you're sharing, like the Buddha Shuddhi and Indriyani Pranaya Ahura, they're actually Sankhya. They're Sankhya in service of bhakti. It's that, because I think Mahendra Prabhu was asking earlier, like, how does Sankhya, how does it really serve our bhakti or create attachment to Krishna? And I was thinking, like, for me, when I hear Indriyani Pranaya Ahura, it's like cleaning up an untidy room.
Yeah.
Because there's like all this stuff, and you know it's supposed to go somewhere, but if it's not in its place, and you walk into that room and your mind is everywhere. But as soon as you put the socks in the drawer, and it's like the senses are saying their thing, but you're like, yeah, but I know where you go. You go over here, and you're subordinate to the mind, and the mind is subordinate to the intelligence, and I'm actually witnessing the intelligence. I'm actually none of those things. And so there's a way in which like all this Sankhya is like creating order. I mean, it's establishing the existing order so that I can actually simplify myself and just direct myself to Krishna.
And there's a way in which you can objectify the body and mind, as Prabhupada does in 2235. Using that verse, Indriyani Pranyahara, you can start meditation with scanning your senses. This is something Prabhupada does in his purport, so it's fair game. He says an ordinary person can do this. Start by scanning your working and information gathering senses. And then you'll notice that he says that you're the one seeing them. Therefore, because you're seeing them, they aren't you. And then you can move Indriyani, Pranyahur, Indriyebhya Param Manaha. You can then say, okay, move to the next level. I'm seeing my mind, which he mentions in that purport also. And then he takes us, move to your intelligence. Then he says, notice the supersoul. He's the one who's like a parent giving you, like he said, a father to the son, giving good instruction. And you'll notice that, as he says, super spirit is there. And you can notice that. And then from that position, one can take that objective view and not be carried away by the mind. You can see the mind's working and notice it, but you're in the mood of making your sankalpa, Krishna, I only want you, I just want service to you. And all the other things become superfluous. And that can be, one's intention can be fixed in there, Prabhupada says, and one can also then understand that the super spirit isn't the topmost, there's a level above that also. Havi Prabhu?
It's intriguing, really. What you just said was fantastic. Besides meditation as such, just like when you start a particular conversation with your public, then you're saying, we close our eyes, and then you see yourself looking at your surroundings and whatever is happening, you are the witness. And so beside meditation, is there any other practical ways to have this revelation?
Well, I don't know, meditation is a catch-all phrase, comes from the word med, which means to take appropriate measures.
Yes.
And really what Prabhupada's doing in that purport is a systematic analysis of the difference between us and the body. If one focuses the mind on Krishna in devotion, manmana bhavamad bhakto, then Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janya Yashavairyam Yanam Chaya Rahaitukam. There's a natural way in which one develops a sense of detachment and knowledge, which means Kshetrajnam Chapyaman Vidhi Sarvashetrishu Bharata. You have a sense, I'm not my body, I'm the soul. As Prabhupada just mentioned here, the Kshetrajna also means to see the super soul. So that's the process of just directly entering in. But my point is that in deity worship, it's like after somebody passes away, you're not supposed to worship. There's a contamination period. What does it mean? It means your mind's so longing for that person, the loved one who left, you can't concentrate on the deity. That's what the contamination is. It's in your mind because you're attached. And so there's a way in which, they say, wait till that diminishes over time, 10 days. You can come back on the altar at that time because you're contaminated. Your elements are all contaminated because of the attachment. So sometimes, kirtan, people can enter in and just hearing the holy name, there's a purification process. But there's a way in which oftentimes, as we say, the 10 offenses, which are also a kind of meditation, they're an adjustment of attitude. And we say, okay, if you don't do these things, then you can chant for millions of years and you're not going to come to the point. So there is some direction that's being given. That just chant Hare Krishna is perfect, but let's just see you do it. Because most people get bored because there's nothing boring about the holy name, but if I'm not listening to the holy name, I'm listening to something else. Like, how many emails you got, man? How come you're not doing... How come you're not sitting properly? Did you wear the right kind of color of kurta today? Whatever it can be, multiplied a million times, one may not be actually focusing on the holy name and so forth. Havi Prabhu, whatever you have in mind, why don't you just say? What were you thinking?
I was thinking of the fact that, yes, there is an observer, and that's us. And we all had, in Krishna consciousness, a glimpse of it.
Had what?
A glimpse of that reality, that we are actually sitting, yantra rudrari mayaya, that we're sitting on a car, on a yantra, and that it's directed by material energy. But the bombarding of the three modes, the desires, the past activities and so on, samskara, sort of invade that space, and it makes it difficult. So I was wondering, since we had already some realizations, tiny, if you just explained it. You just elaborated on the requisites. Thank you.
Thank you. We were on you, right? Okay, go ahead.
When Prabhupada says, if anyone wants to advance in spiritual life, he has to come back to the platform of purified desire. He's saying come back. I thought that was really interesting because, like, ontologically, he's talking about, as Prabhupada was saying, it starts at Vasudeva consciousness, and then these modes come in, and then things get all messy. But also, in my life, I'm thinking come back to purified consciousness because I wake up in the morning and who knows, what my mind is caught onto. I get the privilege of coming back to purified consciousness if I actually want to make advancement. So this is constant course correction of why am I actually doing what I'm doing? What's my actual motivation right now? Do I just go with the flow, or am I going to come back to purified consciousness? That's what I read when Prabhupada said that. I thought it was very salient, very alive.
Nice. Okay, Devavrata, we like salient. Salient, cogent, and what was the third one? Poignant. We're having technical difficulties. We'll be right with you. We're changing batteries. Inconveniences are regretted. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. We're live. Better be good.
I'm just thinking of this verse, Atashri Krishna Namadi, Nabhavet Graimindriyai, Sevan Mukhe Jivadao Swayameva Spratido. So within the context of this Bhuta Shruti and seeing oneself different from the body, I'm just wondering, does this principle of Sevanmukhi jivādau swayameva spratido. Does it play a role in this concept? And if so, what would be the role
as I
that it
was saying,
plays?
when my mind is focused on Krishna, I'm offering this to you as service. I'm doing deliberately, I want to serve you. Hare Krishna, oh my Lord, oh energy Lord, please engage me in your service. If I'm aware of that, and then the service becomes, or the mood becomes so pronounced that it burns up the sense of false ego when we're chanting. Whereas one could chant with using the tongue, and you could not hear, just as much as I could read a paragraph and then have no idea what I just read because I was thinking of something else. So if I'm oriented towards service when I'm chanting, Sevonmukhi jiva, though it's a seva I'm offering, I want Krishna, I want to serve you, I'm your eternal servant, then it becomes potent. Otherwise, the offense we mentioned after all the other ones, it's also offensive inattentive while chanting, which happens to be the root of all the other ones. It's funny, parenthetically. Oh, by the way, here's the main one. That if you're inattentive, you can offend somebody. And if I'm talking to Samripras, and then I just start looking at my watch, it's only this much. And he'll feel oh, you got to go, right? And what to speak of if I'm chanting Hare Krishna, 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 and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about something else, then it's not the same experience. I'm not offering service in that moment. I'm just moving my tongue.
So even though we may have so many other senses which we have to be doing with our senses, other senses in the course of the day, when it's time for chanting japa,
well, it's a good time to practice.
It's time to engage our tongue in that service.
Yeah.
All the other services can...
I probably gave it such a reprieve from the onslaught of the senses, saying, here, you take this time to do nothing but that, and really, he said, sit properly. And he said, and then he gave us those attitude adjusters in the form of the 10 offenses, all from the Padma Purana. Okay, now I'm going to read, I could say this, my favorite purport in the Bhagavatam. I know it's a big deal. Here we go. 32. When egoism and ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested, and from sound come the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. Purport. It appears from this verse that all the objects of our sense gratification are the products of egoism and ignorance. It is understood from this verse that by agitation of the element of egoism and ignorance, the first thing produced was sound, which is the subtle form of ether. It is stated also in the Vedanta Sutra that sound is the origin of all objects of material possession, and that by sound one can also dissolve this material existence. Anavriti Shabdat means liberation by sound. The entire material manifestation began from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement if it has a particular potency. The particular sound capable of doing this is the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna. Our entanglement in material affairs has begun from material sound. Now we must purify that sound in spiritual understanding. There is sound in the spiritual world also. If we approach that sound, then our spiritual life begins, and the other requirements for spiritual advancement can be supplied. We have to understand very clearly that sound is the beginning of the creation of all material objects for our sense gratification. Similarly, if sound is purified, our spiritual necessities are also produced from sound. Here it is said that from sound the ether became manifested, and that the air became manifested from ether. How the ethereal sky comes from sound, how the air comes from sky, and how the fire comes from air will be explained later on. Sound is the cause of the sky, and sky is the cause of shotram, the ear. The ear is the first sense for receiving knowledge. One must give oral reception to any knowledge one wants to receive, either material or spiritual. Therefore, shotram is very important. The Vedic knowledge is called shruti. Knowledge has to be received by hearing. By hearing only can we have access to either material or spiritual enjoyment. In the material world, we manufacture many things for our material comfort simply by hearing. They are already there, but just by hearing, one can transform them. If we want to build a very high skyscraper, this does not mean that we have to create it. The materials for the skyscraper, wood, metal, earth, etc., are already there, but we make our intimate relationship with those already created material elements by hearing how to utilize them. Modern economic advancement for creation is also a product of hearing, and similarly one can create a favorable field of spiritual activities by hearing from the right source. Arjuna was a gross materialist in the bodily conception of life and was suffering from the bodily concept very acutely. But simply by hearing, Arjuna became a spiritualized Krishna conscious person. Hearing is very important, and that hearing is produced from the sky. By hearing only can we make proper use of that which already exists. The principle of hearing to properly utilize preconceived materials is applicable to spiritual paraphernalia as well. We must hear from the proper spiritual source. It's too good. I'm going to read one more verse to finish off our day of hearing. Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. It is very clear herein that as soon as we speak of hearing, there must be a speaker. Without a speaker, there is no question of hearing. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge, which is known as Shruti, or that which is received by hearing, is also called aparusha. Aparusha means not spoken by any person materially created. It is stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Teni Brahma Hridha. The sound of Brahman, or Veda, was first impregnated into the heart of Brahma, the original learned man, Adi Kavaye. How did he become learned? Whenever there is learning, there must be a speaker and the process of hearing. But Brahma was the first created being. Who spoke to him? Since no one was there, who was the spiritual master to give knowledge? He was the only living creature. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge was imparted within his heart by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated within everyone as Paramatma. Vedic knowledge is understood to be spoken by the Supreme Lord, and therefore it is free from the defects of material understanding. Material understanding is defective. If we hear something from a conditioned soul, it is full of defects. All material and mundane information is tainted by illusion, error, cheating, and imperfection of the senses. Because Vedic knowledge was imparted by the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to material creation, it is perfect. If we receive that Vedic knowledge from Brahma in disciplic succession, then we receive perfect knowledge. Every word we hear has a meaning behind it. As soon as we hear the word water, there is a substance, water, behind the word. Similarly, as soon as we hear the word God, there is a meaning to it. If we receive that meaning and explanation of God from God Himself, then it is perfect. But if we speculate about the meaning of God, it is imperfect. Bhagavad Gita, which is the science of God, is spoken by the personality of God Himself. This is perfect knowledge. Mental speculators are so-called philosophers who are researching what is actually God will never understand the nature of God. The science of God has to be understood in disciplic succession from Brahma, who was first instructed about knowledge of God by God himself. We can understand the knowledge of God by hearing Bhagavad Gita from a person authorized in the disciplic succession. When we speak of seeing, there must be form, but our sense perception, by our sense perception, the beginning experience is the sky. Sky is the beginning of form. And from the sky, other forms emanate. The objects of knowledge, the objects of knowledge and... Huh? It's at the end. The objects of... Don't change anything. The object of knowledge and the sense perception begin, therefore, from the sky. Pardon?
That's the same as you.
What? I can't understand anything suddenly. I've entered into a world of babble. What?
They're saying a lot of therefores are in the beginning, but I'm finding all of the therefores that I'm reading are lined up with yours.
I see. We have a similar version then, that's all. There's a few different versions. These are, the India printed version is an older version. You just keep rolling the presses on the old one. Yes.
Reflections?
Yes, Bono. We definitely want to hear your reflection, please.
Yeah, it was very wonderful to hear how Prabhupada was explaining in the purport to that verse you mentioned is one of your favorites. How
I didn't say that. I said it's my favorite.
Okay.
I went out on a limb. Sorry, go ahead.
How he says if we want to construct a skyscraper, all the materials are already there. All we have to do is put them together. And it reminded me of that because also in this purport, Prabhupada says mental speculators are so-called philosophers who are researching what is actual God, will never understand the nature of God. And the takeaway from it, big takeaway on both of these verses for me was that everything's there. It's already there. And it's so, encapsulates this principle of Krishna consciousness was that it's so simple and yet so subtle at the same time that it just really depends on just one thing, just simple acceptance of what's already there. The process is absolutely perfect. It's coming from the perfect source. It's coming from parampara, from realized souls who have none of the four defects, and all we have to do is accept it and apply it, and our life is perfect.
Thank you, Bhava. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Panchatattva, Sri Teen Thakur, if you so desire, please instill in our hearts a mood of simple acceptance of your transcendental instructions. May we accept and follow them, and may we distribute them all over the world. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Go Premanande, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Thank you to the Govardhan a cappella choir. Vanchakalpaduruscha kripasindave patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.